Land Use and Transportation co-chair and the chair for Rose City Park Neighborhood Association. And I welcome you to our summer meeting. Let's see. I'm looking at all my notes, which are just everywhere. Tonight, we have some exciting guest speakers and important neighborhood updates for you. First, we will introduce to you our board member electronic elections. Then we will welcome guest speaker, Oregon Food Bank's CEO, Susanna Morgan, who will talk about the challenging work they've been doing to help folks facing hunger during the pandemic and wildfires. She will be followed by former Mayor Sam Adams. Sam now works for the current mayor, Ted Wheeler, as the Director of Strategic Innovations. Then to round out the evening, you will hear a brief report from our 5 committees. Our mission statement as a neighborhood association is to maintain and improve the livability of the neighborhood and to provide a sense of community. Livability includes feeling safe and included, equal access to knowledge and opportunities, and creating supportive environments where people from all walks of life can thrive. Tonight, it has been exactly 1 year since the killing of George Floyd. I don't believe I'm alone in my shock and horror of this incident. The resulting Black Lives Matter movement has helped unveil America's continuing racist policing, the racist history here in Northwest, and sparked my own soul searching as of my part in this history, being raised as a second generation from Belgian roots, raised in East Tennessee. Hate crimes against Asian and Hawaiian Islanders continue at an all-time high after former President Trump falsely identified China as the root cause of the COVID-19 pandemic. Rose City Park Neighborhood Association recognizes and supports Black Lives Matters, our Indigenous peoples, Asian and Hawaiian Islanders, and all people, races, creeds, color, and sexual orientation. Tonight, I humbly ask you to join me in a moment of silence in thanksgiving of Mother Earth for her lands, water, and every living thing that we all share as one extended family. Thank you. Before we get started, I just have a few announcements. This Rose City Park Neighborhood Association meeting is being brought to you in part by our community partners. That includes our gold standard, which is the German American Society. Silver standard is Albina Head Start, Early Head Start, St. Rose of Lima Catholic Church and School, excuse me, Basics Market, Portland General Electric, and Fire on the Mountain. Our bronze standard is TDR and Associates, Land Use Planning, and Public Engagement. Let's give them a round of applause. So every May, we are supposed to hold in-person elections for members of the Rose City Park Neighborhood Board. Last year, our board chose to postpone those elections until fall in hopes that the restrictions due to the pandemic would let up. Well, we know that did not happen. So here we are, May 2021, facing the same dilemma. Well, our board decided to offer you an electronic elections of the Rose City Park Neighborhood Board members through our use of SurveyMonkey. And you'll notice in the chat line, there is a link to that survey. This survey includes all the existing members of the board, and it also has the eligibility of you to put in your own name in any of those slots, if you so choose. And we also have 10 openings in our board for at-large members. So, you know, you can even put in someone, you know, from your family that you want to keep busy and to keep them from eating all your ice cream. Just put them in there. So anyone of voting age, residing or owning property and or business within the bounds of our neighborhood can vote. For those who may not know, our neighborhood boundaries are Northeast Fremont to I-84, Northeast 47th, east to Northeast 65th Avenue. The electronic elections results will serve as an interim general membership decision until such time as in-person elections can be held. So these elections will be extended from May 25th to June 1st. So you have 1 week to vote. And I'm hoping to broadcast this on Nextdoor so we have as many people voting as possible. It also does include confidential information of your name and address so we can actually validate that you're living in the Rose City Park or work in Rose City Park. So that will be kept confidential. I want to go through the list of members that are on the board. If we can share my screen at this point. Can you see this?
Not yet.
Okay. Let me see what I can do to make sure. How do I do that?
Down at the bottom, the green share screen should be able to do it for you.
There we go. My mini share screens. Okay. This gives you a list of who is running for the Rose City Park Neighborhood Association Board. Currently, the officers include myself, Tamara DeRitter. Zoe Ezekiels has put her name in for vice chair, and she currently is in that large position. Secretary is Jennifer St. House. Treasurer is Richard Crockett. Then we have at-large positions is Jeff Gifford, Meg Griffith, Don Levine, Terry Parker, Zoe Ezekiels, Heidi Hayward, and Kelly Davis. And as I stated previously, we have 10 vacancies in our at-large positions because it holds 17. So please consider putting your name in the hat. And we have a lot of stuff going on in our neighborhood, and we'd love to have your input. Okay. Now, it is my extreme pleasure. It's a little bit early.
I have a question. I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a place online or somewhere that we can see like the organizing documents of the neighborhood? And, you know, for those of us who may not know exactly how it works and might be wondering what kind of, you know, what organization are we actually thinking of becoming a part of, responsibility, you know, taking some responsibility for.
Richard, can you speak about the website?
Yes, the Rose City Park Neighborhood Association has a website that has all of that information there. And if it's something that's missing, you can send an email to info@, Rose City Park Neighborhood, RCPNA.org. And,
right. And does that include financials like budget and stuff like that?
There are some up there. We do not have a current budget for this current year because we haven't figured out if we're going to be able to make any money.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
We know that we're going to be spending money for our concerts in the park, but since we cannot do the cleanups, we really haven't identified another stream of income.
Okay. Any other questions, folks? Okay. Again, the elections are open for anyone who lives or works in our Rose City Park Neighborhood Association. The voting is by SurveyMonkey this year. You'll find the link in the chat line here, and it is open until June 1st. So please enjoy going through that and adding your neighbor. whatever makes you happy. But we do a lot of good work in our community. Right now, we do have 5 different committees. That includes public involvement, communications and events, community safety, diversity committee, land use and transportation, and the Rose City Park Playground Project. Those are active. We have others that are interested in starting up new projects as well. Okay, at this point, it's my extreme pleasure to introduce to you an amazing community leader as our next guest speaker. Susanna Morgan has served as CEO for Oregon Food Bank for almost 10 years. Under Susanna Morgan's leadership, Oregon Food Bank has a vision to build resilient communities that never go hungry. Prioritizing equity, diversity, and inclusion. Oregon Food Bank has significantly increased the distribution of fresh regional produce and advocates public policy solutions that address the root causes of hunger. Please join me in welcoming Susanna Morgan.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Nice to be with you tonight. Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you.
And I'm at home in this weird Zoom world that we're living in. So if a half-naked 9-year-old comes in, yeah, that's the world we're in right now, right? I think I can pretty much guarantee you underwear, but anything else is optional in my house. And I am about, 2 miles west of you. I live in Irvington. So I'm a Northeast Portlander myself. So as Tamara said, I'm Susanna Morgan. I'm the CEO at Oregon Food Bank. And Tamara asked me to talk to you tonight a little bit about the year that we have just had. Imagine capitals for all of that. But before we do that, I'd like to just set a couple ground rules. The first ground rule is interruptions are totally cool and in fact encouraged. Conversation is more fun than talking at you. So please do, and you can do it the extrovert way by getting off of mute and jumping in, or you can do it the introvert way by typing it in the chat, whatever works for you. And then I will hope that even if you don't feel comfortable jumping in, that we will have time for conversation and really get to have some good conversation at the end. So let me just ground you in some basic facts of hunger and how the Oregon Food Bank works. First, imagine with me a tree. At the top of the tree, we have people who ask for food assistance. Pre-pandemic, that number was 860,000 people across the 36 counties of Oregon plus Clark County, Washington that asked for food assistance. 860,000 people, right? That's a total crisis. That was 2019 numbers. 2020, that was 1.6 million. That would be 1 out of every 4 people asked for food assistance last year. Because that includes a lot of people that I know and I'm close to, and Zoe, thank you, who asked for food assistance, get food from a food assistance site. So that's the next branch down on the tree. Top branch is the folks seeking food assistance. The next branch down is food assistance sites. There are 200 here in Portland. The biggest in Northeast would be the Northeast Emergency Food Pantry off of 72nd. You probably tried to get through there on distribution day and turned around and gone a different way. And there are 1,400 across the state and Clark County, Washington. Just wrap your head around that for a minute. 1,400 food pantries, meal sites, after-school programs, senior centers, shelters, 1,400 places where people get food assistance. Those food assistance sites get most of their food from a regional food bank. So that's the next branch down on the tree. And there are 21 regional food banks across Oregon and Southwest Washington, each one serving a 1 to 4 county area. At Oregon Food Bank, we own and operate 5 of those regional food banks. So our main facility on Northeast 33rd, everybody been by there? Can you picture it in your head? That is both the statewide facility that I'll talk about in a moment, and the place that I work, our headquarters, and the regional food bank for Multnomah and Clackamas counties. So the food assistance sites come to get their food there. So you can think of it as the wholesaler. So we got people experiencing hunger, getting food from a food assistance site. The food assistance site gets food from a regional food bank, and the regional food banks get food from the statewide warehouse, which is also at 33rd on Northeast 33rd. And where do we get food, you ask, or you would if it wasn't on Zoom and you could actually participate with me? We get food from our local food industry, grocery stores, manufacturers, retailers, growers are an increasingly important source of food. And we get food through the US government, through the USDA, and we purchase food. In non-pandemic times, we also do food drives. It makes up about 5% of our total food, but it brings in a lot of great variety of food. So that's how the food assistance works. It's sort of a tree. Food flows into the trunk, to the statewide warehouse, out to the regional food banks, to the food assistance sites, to the person experiencing hunger. Except that this is the real world and nothing is as neat as that. So food also flows in all this way too. The people experiencing hunger get food outside of food assistance sites. They have money from their wages, or they have savings, or they have SNAP, or they have other ways of getting food. And the food assistance sites might have a relationship with the Starbucks around the corner, or with their church, which does food drives. And the regional food banks pick up at their local grocery stores. We're not picking up at the Fred Meyer in Redmond. That would be silly. Neighbor Impact, which runs the regional food bank in Redmond, is picking that up, right? So it comes in up the trunk and this way. So that's how the food assistance system works, just as a grounding for you. And the sort of scale of hunger that before we had a pandemic, we were still at close to 1 in 10 people who needed food assistance, and now we're at 1 in 4. By any measure, that's an epidemic of its own sort, right? So at Oregon Food Bank, our mission is to eliminate hunger and its root causes. So we don't just work on doing food distribution, although clearly that's important because everyone needs 3 meals a day to survive. But we would also like to get to a place in which we were no longer needed, in which hunger didn't happen, in which the systems that create hunger were eliminated. And you can, all of you, I'm sure, can think to yourself what those systems are. Not having a living wage, not having affordable housing, not having access to affordable and quality healthcare, not having safety nets that will take care of you if you have a real disability or in your old age. And as Zoe put in the chat, capitalism and racism. I'm going to stay out of the capitalism fight, but absolutely at Oregon Food Bank, we think that structural racism is a root cause of hunger, and you can see that in the data that our Black and brown neighbors are overrepresented among folks who experience hunger, and our trans communities are overrepresented among folks who experience hunger, and our immigrant and migrant communities and our single moms are overrepresented among folks who experience hunger. And that's not an accident. It's because we design systems that way. Not the people on this call, but we humans in America design systems this way. And that's actually good news, right? If we built these walls, we can blow them up. So in addition to this past year of crazy working to try and keep up with a doubling of the request for food assistance, we were also working on structural change. So let me just talk a little bit more about what this past year has been like. So what was it, March 16th? Right about March 16th of 2020 that we went into lockdown, right? And by March 18th, it was clear that the requests for food assistance were going to skyrocket. We were already seeing huge lines show up requesting food assistance. And in part, this was because people were already being laid off or were experiencing economic difficulties. And in part was because the thing that people could do, they weren't sure how long their savings would last. They weren't sure if they were going to keep their job, but they could fill up their pantries, right? They could make sure that there was enough there to make sure their kids had enough food for the next 3 weeks. And so for the next 2 weeks, I barely slept. I was in this constant state of, oh my God, we're going to fail, right? This is a tsunami of need, and there's no way we're going to keep up with it. And at the same time, we're all making it up as we go along about how to handle the pandemic, right? We're learning that masks are needed. We're learning about social distancing. We're learning about all of the things we now all take for granted. Everybody remember those weeks? It was such a weird time. And the truth is that I'm not queen. I don't control those 1,400 food assistance sites. I don't control 16 of those 21 regional food banks. So I needed more than 1,400 different groups of people to make decisions to stay open, to make decisions to figure it out, to come up with ways to keep their volunteers safe, to keep the people experiencing hunger safe, to keep staff safe, and to keep working on food distribution. And we did. At the very worst of it, 5% of our network shut down. So I'm sure some of you have been tracking. There were huge distributions: Philadelphia, San Antonio, Houston, New York, these baseball field, football field sized arenas, and lines of cars that went on with people sitting in line for 4 hours and running out of gas while they were waiting to get boxes of food. Do you guys remember these stories? We didn't do that here in Oregon. And we didn't do it here in Oregon because 95% of those 1,400 food assistance sites stayed open. Because we have built relationships, we built strength over the years so that we could make it through. And of course, I wasn't sure that we were going to make it through until we did make it through. Then I slept for like 48 hours. I will also tell you another story from those early days. It was just clear we were going to need more food. And in the first stimulus bills passed by Congress before the end of March 2020, they authorized a bunch more food coming from USDA. But it takes at least 3 months for USDA to turn that food around and for it to start showing up in our doors. So, and we could have spent $1 million a week on food. So I was going to run out of community generosity instantly if I tried to just do it as purchasing. And to her great credit, Governor Kate Brown got me on the phone and said, "Okay, Susanna, what do you need?" And I said, "Governor, I need $8 million. $1 million a week for the next 8 weeks to get me through until when this congressional appropriation comes through." And she said, "Okay." And 48 hours later, I was signing paperwork for $8 million, which never happens, never happens. Every other bit of money I've ever gotten for the government takes me 4 months and about 50 pages worth of paperwork. So huge credit to Governor Brown. And we split that money. About a third of it we kept for statewide purchases because we can buy in bulk and more cheaply, but it takes longer because we're importing it from somewhere or other. And about 2/3 we split. We just sent out checks or reimbursement checks to the regional food banks to said, go buy in your community. What do you need? What do you need in your community? Go buy it and we'll reimburse you for it. So that there was very quick turnaround for food. And that's what got us through the absolute worst of that. And in the middle of all this, we're still thinking about how do we fix the root causes of hunger. It was so clear that the reason that so many people were looking for food assistance was there just isn't any depth. There's just no depth to prosperity, right? Does anybody remember the article that Forbes put out probably a year and a half, maybe even 2 years ago now? I'm so lost in time. In which they said that 40% of Americans could not meet an unexpected expense of $400. 40% of Americans do not have $400 at their disposal to fix their car, right? And that's what happened. You got laid off, you got put on unemployment, you worried about those things, and there was no cushion, there's no fallback, there's no space for something to go wrong. And of course, a year ago there were no jobs either. It's not like you got laid off and you could go find another job. So that just galvanized our work to work on the root causes of hunger. And last May, we participated in organizing the community for the ballot measure to fund affordable housing at the county level, Multnomah County, because we know that high housing costs are one of the biggest root causes of hunger across the state. It's not just Portland. Across the state, our housing costs are ridiculously high when it comes in comparison to wages. So I still can't quite believe that we managed to pull that off in the middle of a pandemic with everybody working from home. But we did. And then Mr. Floyd was killed a year ago today, right? And Oregon Food Bank at that point in time was already 5 years into our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. And we had already committed to working on structural racism as one of the root causes of hunger. Mr. Floyd's death re-energized a racial justice movement. And whether or not you appreciate the way the protests played out in Portland, and I've got some mixed feelings on that myself, I completely appreciate and understand the drive for justice that animated that. And it led to, at the state level, the BIPOC Legislative Caucus recommending a suite of proposals to reform police accountability that we organized and supported at the end of June last year. That was a really fun discussion at my board meeting because we had never worked on police issues before. But to us, it was absolutely clear that if you're over-policed, then you're over-incarcerated. If you're over-incarcerated, then you are much more likely to end up in a lifetime of poverty and hunger, because it's much, much harder to find a job if you have had a prison record. And there are very, very stark statistics on how that happens differentially for different racial groups. So we did that. And then this fall, we worked on Vote Out Hunger, and we worked on a whole suite of things. I'm sure you guys will remember some of them. The library bond, a universal preschool here in Multnomah County. At the statewide level, the decriminalization of minor drug possession and turning that into a mental health issue with mental health antidotes instead of a judicial system issue with criminal justice antidotes. Managing to do all of these things in the middle of a pandemic. And it brings us to where we are now, which is slowly opening up, right? We have seen for the first quarter of this year, the number of people who are asking for food assistance slowly start to fall. We're slowly coming down from that that almost unbelievable high that we saw last year. And this is partially due to some jobs being added back to our economy and to the economy reopening. And it's partially due to investments at the federal level for additional benefits for SNAP or unemployment or additional stimulus, right? And that paying off for folks across our state. So we find ourselves slowly emerging from this pandemic cocoon, and knowing that the best scenario is that it takes us 2 years to get us back to only 860,000 people needing food assistance. 2 years from now, in the best scenario, we'll be back down to that crisis that we were at in February of last year before the pandemic hit. So there's no easy path ahead of us, but we've succeeded so far. And that gives me hope and confidence that we writ large, not we Oregon Food Bank, but we Oregon will continue to succeed. So those are the things that I really wanted to tell you today. I'd love to have a conversation about where your curiosity is and what you're interested in. And I might have a cat jump up on me, and that'll be another interesting point here.
Well, I've just got a few questions from the board that I'd like to share.
Sure.
When do you think in-person food donations will be accepted again by the Oregon Food Bank?
That would be the $100,000 question, right? No earlier than fall, and it might be January. The challenge for us is trying to ensure that our people who have to work in the community are safe. And not every one of our warehouse workers and drivers can get the vaccination due to medical reasons. So we're watching the data. We're watching the science for when it feels like we're hitting herd immunity. And when it feels like we're hitting herd immunity will be when we open back up to the public.
Okay, so if we do have food donations, we should bring them directly to the Northwest Food Pantry, or?
Absolutely, bring them to your closest food pantry. If
Okay.
NEFP is your one, then great. You can also check OregonFoodFinder.org. That lists all of the food assistance sites across Oregon. You just put in your zip code and it'll pop up and show you the ones closest to you with their open hours.
Zoe.
Sorry, for donations, I know there's also like a collection of free fridges around Portland. I don't know exactly where they are, but you can just go, and they're usually like fridges that are electrically powered, and you can just put your cold stuff and perishables in there. And then they have like shelves for fruits, veggies, cans, things like that. And then also what I've been doing is I've just been like buying groceries for houseless folks that are in the neighborhood, and just like being like, hey, what do you want? Like when I went to the farmer's market on Saturday, I would buy people food and be like, hey, what do you want? Yeah.
Can I also just recommend, I mean, it's one thing in that you bought some hominy for a recipe you didn't end up making, and you don't want that hominy to go to waste. But if you're thinking hard about how do you want to help people experiencing hunger, money goes a lot farther than your food. We can expend it on exactly what we need to fill out what we don't have. And that's true at both the Oregon Food Bank level and at your local food pantry level. So you're not guessing what might be needed. You can just make a dollar donation at whatever level is comfortable for you.
And on that note, we actually, the officers for the board went ahead and initiated a fundraising page for Rose
Fabulous.
City Park. And we've got already $1,200 worth
Woo!
already raised. And it's in the chat line. So anyone that might be interested in donating to that page, please do so, and share that with your friends.
That's fabulous. We say that for every dollar donated, we can access 3 meals worth of food. So that's what, 4,600? Am I doing the math wrong? No, 3,600 meals. That's great. That's really impressive.
So I have a question about that 1 in 4 number. I'm wondering how it compares to other states. And also I'm wondering how it compares, I don't know what the smallest geography you can drill down to is, but like how it compares to Rose City Park or Northeast Portland or whatever, whatever you can tell us.
Yeah. Hunger doubling across the country has been about average. So we're following the national trends there. The digging down to data is unfortunately not something that we are currently able to do. I'm wondering how much you want to know about our data challenges. Let me just tell you this.
Well, I want to know everything about your data challenges, but this is probably not the right forum for it.
Well, it is a holy grail in food banking that we're able to know who is accessing food on a real-time basis. Because of those 1,400 food assistance sites, as you know, a lot of them are operated by churches or Rotary clubs or neighborhood associations who are keeping that data on index cards or Excel spreadsheets, right? And so we've never been able to say, Susanna Morgan went here one day and there another, not to blame Susanna Morgan, she should get the food that she needs, but to be able to get a real count of who needs food, right? And so before the pandemic started, we were rolling out a cloud-based client tracking system at our food pantries for them to be able to just use an iPad. And we were providing grants for technology and grants for internet access and rolling that out. And unfortunately, the tsunami of need through the pandemic, a lot of people went back to index cards or whatever they need just to be able to survive this past year. So it's one of my regrets is that we weren't 2 years farther ahead, because if we'd been 2 years farther ahead, we would have had better data. But, if I had to choose between failing at serving people and not collecting good data, I think we chose the right one to fail at.
I was wondering, how are you preparing for possible impact of wildfires this year?
Yeah, every year the wildfires seem to be getting worse and worse, aren't they? The interesting truth is that we are not needed a lot in the immediate aftermath of a wildfire. That there are systems, emergency management systems in place in the immediate aftermath of a wildfire. Red Cross, FEMA, the Southern Baptists come in and do hot meals. Sometimes we supply these partners with food. We often supply water. But it's not that often that we are supplying huge quantities of food because the folks who've been evacuated are living in shelters or mass meals happening through these kinds of systems. We are needed a month later when the shelters shut down and folks who haven't been able to move back in are now having to deal with their ruined home, and they still haven't gotten their insurance money or their FEMA money, and they're living in a motel. That's when we're needed. And we have generally found that our 1,400 food assistance sites are strong enough to absorb that second wave of need from folks. And what we do is end up shoring up. So, for instance, in the Salem and was it Santiam corridor, we ended up pouring some extra food into the food assistance sites there. And down in the Medford area, we poured some extra food in there because they had extra folks coming in. But we didn't have to set up new distribution systems. We just needed to invest more deeply in the distribution systems that we have. Interestingly enough, every year we seem to be making emergency food boxes for California because for some reason their emergency system just works differently, and they need some more to-go boxes than works here. The other, I don't know if it's a good truth or a bad truth, is that so far the wildfires have not hit a massive population area. So they're impacting huge acreages, but the number of people impacted is in the low thousands. I think it was 3,000 households, even with this terrible wildfire year this last year, maybe 4,000, of which more than half would be economically secure and have a way to manage. So we were talking about fairly small numbers out of 860,000 that we're serving every year. I'm talking about a fairly small extra influx. Of course, for those families, it's devastating. Lost everything, lost your home. I am in no way trying to minimize the challenge for families, but from a systems perspective, it hasn't been challenging for us. We were worried. We were worried about the regional food bank in Medford, but the fires didn't hit Medford proper. We were worried about food pantries between Medford and Ashland. And it turned out that the house next to it burned, but the food pantry didn't burn. We were worried about food pantries along the Mackenzie River and east of Salem, but we didn't end up losing a single food pantry in this last year. It's just luck, as far as I can tell. Just another year, it'll be different. The other thing I would say, though, about wildfires is for this past year, we found that we weren't prepared for the terrible smoke, right? My first duty is to ensure that the people who work at Oregon Food Bank are safe and healthy so that they can serve the rest of the community, right? It's the put on your own mask first before helping others airline thing. And the air in our warehouse was not safe to breathe, because the air at Portland wasn't safe to breathe. And we put out an emergency call to FEMA, and we now have the right, they're called respirators, which make me think of that horrible thing in the hospitals that you go on if you have a terrible case of COVID, but they're not. They're more like the things that firemen wear, go over your mouth, and they've got two big filters here. We now have enough respirators to take care of all of our warehouse and driver crew so that we know we'll be safe going forward.
So Susanna, this is Suzanne Briggs, and I work within this school system, and I know that within the United States, the waste in the school system and the school lunch program is quite high compared to other countries. So I was wondering, do you have a formal system or in being able to recapture that food and get it out to people in need?
The answer is no. There is not a good system for capturing the waste from schools. And while it looks like a lot to an individual, it's not a lot to a food bank that's picking up things in 40,000 foot trucks. In general, our advice to anyone who's working with a school is to create a share table. If you're not going to eat it, put it on a share table and let some other kid take it home or eat it. And that cuts your waste down to a really very small amount. The challenge is when you haven't figured out formal ways to do that kind of sharing. So that's what I would say is that if you're feeling at Rose City Park Elementary, oh, you do have a share table at Rose City Park, or don't? You do? Yay! Doesn't it? It makes a huge difference. And frankly, if you have a share table and just anyone can go get it, then you also take away stigma, right? Because it's not, I'm picking this up because I'm not sure I'm going to have dinner tonight, but rather, oh, I just felt like, some extra applesauce today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question.
They like to trade too. So it's a nice trading for the better snack situation.
I know we love to complain about our school meals, but actually it seems to me here in Portland, our school meals are really quite good. My kids don't qualify for free meals, but now we're getting universal meals, right? In the pandemic, and so they're coming home with this food, and I've been pretty impressed. Lots of whole grains. They have to meet nutritional standards. Tamara, am I pushing up against my time, or how are
No,
we
you're
doing?
doing great. You're
Okay.
doing great. We got plenty of time. Another 15 minutes here. I like the idea of a food table, share food table, and wonder how we could, implement something like that on a neighborhood scale. And
Free
maybe
fridge.
a fridge. Just have a plug-in fridge and set it outside on the curb, or what?
Yeah, I've seen it work before when I was helping the indigenous family at Red House. They had the free fridge set up like on the curb, and they just plugged it in through like a extension cable. I don't know how we would have that work, but I've seen them be very successful. And then it's again the no stigma where like anybody can just grab what they need.
I like it.
So the trained part of me that has spent way too many hours thinking about food safety gets nervous about perishable foods and who's managing that fridge and making sure that nobody is getting sick. So I'm not going to tell you not to do it. It's not my business. I'm just telling you where my gut is saying. What I suggest actually is block parties, big meals, because it's not just about feeding folks. It's about creating connections across economic status, right? It's about creating connections across any difference, across gay and straight, across black and white, across old and young. And that at the neighborhood level, it seems to me that the most important thing we can do is by fighting the concept of the other. And so, having a meal and inviting, have a block party, invite the whole block, or have a meal, invite the 5 neighbors around you, or, invite the 2 neighbors you know really well and the 2 neighbors you haven't met yet. And if you have a whole block party, in addition to just having everybody bring food, you could also have, and we'll collect, anybody got extra, bring all the clothing you were planning on taking it to the Goodwill and we'll put it out, and then you can take whatever you want. If you see something there you want, great. And if you got something to leave, great. And at the end of the day, anything that's left, we'll pack it up and take it off to Goodwill. So creating opportunities for that kind of sharing in which there's no difference between the givers and the takers.
Nice. And so you stepped right into the answering the last question I had, which is what are the top things we as a neighborhood association could do to help?
Well, yes, that is absolutely at the very top of my list. And whenever I speak to anybody, they ask me, what's the thing that you can do to end hunger? I would say, get to know someone who isn't like you. Make a new friend. Let's break down those walls that pull us apart. But if that sounds just too hippie for you, and you'd like something a little more practical, or if you're up for that, but you have even more energy, then we can always use more help in civic engagement. As you heard, we regularly are doing work at the city, county, state, and a national level. And I was once told by Senator Stevens, I ran the Food Bank of Alaska for 12 years before coming here. That's a whole nother story with polar bears, I'll tell you sometime. But Senator Stevens once told me that whenever 300 people contacted him about anything, it made it to his desk, right? It just doesn't take that many of us to get the attention of our elected officials. So never feel like sending an email or making a phone call isn't making a difference, because what we need is 300, right? And you can be one of the 300 to get something onto somebody's radar as something that's critical. At Oregon Food Bank, you can sign up for our advocacy list. You can go to our how to help page and click on advocate, and our advocacy list will regularly send you emails And if you're not in the mood, you just ignore it. And then when you're feeling all feisty, you jump in and participate. Or if it's not your issue, you don't weigh in on that one, but you wait for the one that you're feeling passionate about. And then the last thing obviously money is always great. And thank you, Tamara, for already organizing that. The biggest barrier I always have is having enough resources. But we're still challenged for volunteers because so many folks over 60 who are really the core of the volunteer system for the food distribution system. Because if you're retired, you can show up week in and week out. You can just make, Wednesday morning is my time and I go and I do this. And so it's retired folks who are the core of the volunteer system, filled in by folks who find spots of time. We appreciate everyone, but that regular core has been really helpful. And of course, very sensibly, folks who in that age bracket, which I haven't quite reached yet, quarantined and have been very careful about coming back into contact, as they should, right? Put your own mask on first. But that means that we're still looking for volunteers. So sign up on our website to volunteer. If it's something you can do on a regular basis, fabulous. If it's something you can do once, fabulous. If it's something you can do as a neighborhood association, fabulous. We're running shifts of 10 or 12 folks at Oregon Food Bank right now, but places like neighborhood Northeast Emergency Food Pantry are looking for volunteers. So we also help place volunteers at food assistance sites across the metro area. And you don't have to be incredibly physically able. There are jobs at most places for folks who need to be seated as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Hey, Zachary, you had a question. Oh, no, you're raising your hand for the dog.
Your dog had a question. Are dogs welcome at Oregon Food Bank? No, unfortunately. Welcome to visit me personally, though, and play with my puppy.
So those who didn't hear the initial part of our discussion, there is a fundraising list up there. Our board officers started up a Rose City Park Food Bank page to raise money for the Oregon Food Bank. So anyone who's interested in helping donate to the food bank, please do so through that web page. And are there any other questions for Susanna and her amazing work that she's been doing?
Just a hearty round of applause.
Can I ask a quick question, actually, Suzanne? And I'm
Yeah.
late to this. I'm sorry to be the late arrival here.
It's okay.
I'm just curious if you all have a sense of what's going to happen once the monthly child tax credit kicks in, and how you all are expecting that to impact your work.
Yeah, I adore the monthly child tax credit. Talk about aiming funds directly at folks who are disproportionately likely to experience hunger, right? If you have little kids at home, you are struggling. And if you're low income, you're struggling in every possible way. My kids are 9 and 12, so it's not that distant in my past to remember those stages. And so, yes, I absolutely adore it. I think it will be interesting to see how it plays out for us. We have a whole lot of folks who are currently behind on rent, managing eviction moratoriums, used up the last of their savings. I rather think that we will not see it show up in the food assistance lines early, but rather late, as we're the canary in the coal mine, but the first place people turn to and the last place people stop going to. And hopefully that's partially because we hand out food and partially because we're nice. But I like to think we're nice. But I think I am just so fascinated to see how that plays out. we under-resource. There's no question in my mind that we under-resource our low-income families, and we under-resource families with small children. We don't give enough paid family leave. We don't subsidize childcare. We don't, compared to other Western nations, we really, really make it difficult for families. So to me, this is a step in the right direction. We also, just on the subject of big federal programs, I don't know if any of you have been paying attention to pandemic EBT, but this is a program, maybe you know it, but you just don't know that wonky name. The government decided, the US government decided to put out cash payments to families who have kids for K through 12 who would otherwise have been getting a meal at school. And they started it last May and June. Then they reauthorized it for the fall. It's now been reauthorized through all of 2021 through June of 21. And we've recently heard in the last few weeks that the Biden administration is going to continue that for next calendar year. Or if the schools reopen, then they will continue universal school meals, which means that you don't have to be income tested to get a meal at school. All kids can just eat at school. So that's been a lifeline for a lot of families, although I could spend a whole hour talking about how logistically complex it's been. But what, again, same principle, Zachary. Let's target resources to the families we think are most likely to be struggling.
Okay. Matt, you just joined us. Do you have any questions for Susanna Morgan? I want to make sure everybody has a chance. Okay. All right. Well, I, for one, am so grateful for all your work, and thank you so much on behalf of Rose City Park Neighborhood Association for joining us and sharing your energy and thoughts and great ideas. We hope to help you out and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's at the neighborhood level where change happens. So never think that you're small and unimportant. You are in fact the building block of inclusive democracy and communities that never go hungry. So I'm honored to have joined you tonight.
Thank you so much. Take care. Best of luck. Okay, well, our next speaker is a man of many talents, and we are blessed to have him back here in the Northwest. Former Portland Mayor Sam Adams now works for Mayor Ted Wheeler as the Director of Strategic Innovations. I know Sam from working on a research committee on the Women's Rights Amendment. In fact, I was actually the sole minority report that was advocating for the Women's Rights Amendment, Equal Rights Amendment, and won the day. You know, it ended up the rest of the city club voted for the minority report supporting the Equal Rights Amendment. Yay. So it was working with Sam that I was able to do that good work. Sam, you're doing some amazing work, and I'm curious on what it means. Can you tell us what neighborhoods are supposed to be doing and what it is you're doing? Sam?
Well, thank you, Tamara. It's good to see you, and good to be back speaking, conversing with this great neighborhood association. Congratulations on your elections underway. Don't let the pandemic prevent neighborhood democracy from happening. I'm working as you mentioned, as the Strategic Innovations Director, in charge of a group of really smart folks in the office of Mayor Ted Wheeler's, and we're focused on the recovery of the city from the pandemic and on moving forward the mayor's agenda on public safety, police reform, on issues such as helping local businesses succeed through some for many of them, very trying times, and more competition from online sales that happen out of town and working on making sure that city government is as responsive and as focused on the needs of those that are most vulnerable in the community, such as houseless. You were just talking to a representative from a great organization that helps a lot of Portlanders. And houselessness, those living with houselessness is a key priority of ours. And a lot of other important work, but happy to, you've been meeting for quite a while, so want to leave lots of time for questions. Happy to answer any questions on any issues. There's a lot of issues facing our city and a lot of work underway to try to address them. So, questions?
Yeah, Sam, you had put out a challenge or something like that that said a call to neighborhoods to help clean up Portland.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do to help us restart our neighborhood cleanup?
Yeah, so the annual cleanup where the city provided drop boxes, and is that the cleanup you're talking about? Yeah. Well, you'll be happy to know. Let me talk a little bit about the citywide cleanup that is underway. The city hasn't been, in my lifetime, as dirty and ratty as it is right now. We have a citywide cleanup strategy that the city council recently funded. It includes trash, graffiti, abandoned cars, street sweeping, and other factors that neighborhoods are dealing with. Key partner, we have a number of community-based partners that we work with on this effort, including Solve Oregon. We've divided the city up into 11 zones and have assessed each zone for their level of cleanliness and have neighborhood volunteer zone leaders that we work with to get the cleanup done. We've been doing cleanups, and after June 25th and 26th, we'll continue to do cleanups. But the annual Pick It Up Portland events is the 25th and 26th. 25th is focused on business areas. The 26th is focused on neighborhoods. And you have an opportunity to sign up with solveoregon.org to volunteer to put together a cleanup in your neighborhood. We also are working with Adopt-A-Block. If you haven't signed up for adoptablock.org, where you agree to walk your block every week, look for pick up trash and document with a PDX reporter graffiti that we will come out and clean up. Since we launched this 2 months ago, the citywide cleanup, I think we're up just in the last 2 months. It's 1.7 million pounds of trash. We're focusing on all areas of the city. Some parts of the city are experiencing, for example, accumulation of garbage or illegal dump sites. We have a partnership with Metro to focus on that. So you will see, probably, we used to do them back when I was in City Hall last time, as Tamara mentioned, we would host annual neighborhood cleanups where the city would provide these big drop boxes, dumpsters. So the mayor in his most recently passed budget had that program was cut, and the mayor has money in his budget to bring those back. So we'll probably be seeing those closer to July or August in the summer. And in addition to dumpsters for garbage, we're also this time working with some local community-based organizations that are also doing repurposing. And obviously we've added to our vision recycling. So that, in addition to cleaning up the rest of the city, is part of our citywide plan to clean the city up.
You had mentioned the 25th and 26th. Is that of May or of June?
June. Okay. Yeah, so you'll be hearing more about it. 25th, 26th of June is Pick It Up Portland, the annual cleanup day for the city of Portland. This time we'll probably have, in the 11 zones within the city, we'll probably have 50 cleanups happening. So word on that will be getting out in about a week and a half. So we'll make sure that your leadership, Tamara, gets that and then can distribute it out to all of you of how you can participate in organizing a cleanup or just participating as a cleaner in an existing cleanup.
We do have several dump sites here in our neighborhood, actually down towards I-84. You can see
Right.
it from the freeway. Just
Yep.
people just dropping things down towards the max rail.
Yeah, and what we've also found is in existing camps for our unhoused neighbors is that people are also dumping trash in those campsites, thinking that they'll be cleaned up when the campsites are cleaned up. So we have a big challenge ahead of us. It's going to take all of us to pitch in and clean things up.
Okay,
A lot of
Stephanie
it
was
isn't
first.
their trash though. It's their personal belongings.
What's that?
A lot of the things that you're saying are trash in and around those houseless camps are also their personal belongings.
No, we don't clean up personal belongings in the way that we clean
You
up
take them.
trash.
Yeah, you
No, we
take their
don't.
personal belongings.
Not since I've been here, and if it does, it's an accident. What
The
I've talked
city's
about
currently
is
being sued.
what I've talked about. I think that happened like 6 months ago. So
The lawsuit was actually announced today.
I don't know about that. I'll have to look into that. So we don't clean up, or our efforts at cleaning up the city is not to move houseless campsites. We do have partnerships and pay folks like through Ground Score and other places, folks that are currently unhoused. We pay them to help clean up, sometimes their own campsites, sometimes others. And we have other partnerships with transition projects. So our work at cleaning up the city, there's a different part of the city that moves houseless camps and removes houseless camps. What I'm in charge of is to helping clean up the city, including helping clean up camps. But we work with local community service providers to work with those that are in those camps to offer them cleaning services.
Okay,
So
we've
I'll have
got
to look at this. Your face is scrunched up, Zoe.
Yeah, in a lot of cases with these sweeps, the houseless folks don't receive any notice that these things are happening. They don't have any time. There's heavy police presence that makes them uncomfortable. So in a lot of cases, they're not involved and you don't let them know in time.
So we have 30-day postings for the cleanups that I'm involved with. And again, the city's cleaning green that I'm responsible for isn't about camp sweeping or camp moving. It's about helping to clean up around the camps. And I would say, having been on a lot of these cleanups, where we reach out a week or 2 weeks ahead of time, letting people know that we'll be in the area cleaning up garbage and passing out bags for them to clean up if they don't want us to come into a houseless camp. Under my efforts, we don't. Oftentimes they'll clean up and leave the blue plastic bags outside their camps. And most folks are just grateful for having some place to put their trash. I'll have to look into what you're talking about. There is HUCRP, which is another program of the city that's responsible for looking at campsites of unhoused camps. And that's a separate program that what I work on.
Stephanie Singer had a question.
So I have a question about Northeast 33rd Drive. I drive that stretch, every week or two. And I mean, for the past, couple of years that I've been doing that, there have been people living along there. But in the last month or so, the amount of trash is just, it's just astounding how much garbage is there. And I wanted to ask, what happened? what's the story with that? And what is the city going to do about it? Because that's not anybody's neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people.
I mean, except for the
Portlanders-
people who are living there, but it's not, yeah.
Well, there are a lot of Portlanders that are living in unhoused in really squalid conditions and need better services, need garbage service.
I'm sorry, this is beyond the people.
No, I know. I've been there.
And what they're producing. There is just, I mean, people must be dumping there or something. So I'm interested
Yeah,
in
as I
anything
mentioned-
specific about that spot,
like-
and what happened.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, there are a lot of people that dump their trash in existing camps that house the unhoused. And we've seen that all over the city. And what happened is that's a place where folks could sleep. That's a place where folks could find a sense of community, but it wasn't well served. There isn't services provided by the city in terms of like garbage service. So they don't have a lot of options other than the garbage that they create gets thrown nearby or gets stored nearby where they're at.
So is
The
there
number of houseless people has in the city has spiked exponentially. By some estimations, there are 350 unsanctioned campsites around the city. So the issue of helping to clean up those campsites and provide them better sanitary options, better garbage options, is part of the challenge that we face.
Is there a resource that we can contact either at Metro or at the city to identify where there are illegal dump sites?
Yeah, just online, it's PDX Reporter.
Okay.
And it's optimized for mobile devices as well. And it gives the geo coordinates in addition to whatever description, allows you to submit a photograph as well. And that is the most efficient way and a way for us to then monitor to make sure that complaints that are made are followed up on.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So a few weeks ago, I was part of a big cleanup that Solve put on, and it was a big dump site. And I can't talk enough about how successful that felt. A bunch of neighbors coming together, and it was a couple hours of hard work, and then thousands of pounds of stuff that had clearly been dumped by probably what I would describe as like ill-meaning people, like people who were neighbors, probably housed neighbors, actually just taking advantage of a spot that was a little dirty. And so we all got together and it's clean. And since then it stayed clean, and it was like a big point of pride, and it felt great. So I can't plug what you were saying about that partnership with Solve enough. It feels right. One of the things that has come up, because I've been working with a neighbor of mine and trying to put together a high needs cleanup in our neighborhood, is rights to do cleaning around, not on obviously, but around railroad tracks and the I-5, the corridor. And we've been told it's all on pause because negotiations, I guess is the right word, are taking place behind closed doors between kind of the parties. And so I'm curious if you can give us a little insight about what's the timing, because I think as Tamara mentioned, it's like you drive down the interstate corridor and there's just trash everywhere. And as a concerned citizen visually, but also just environmentally, there's plastics and metals and heavy metals that are going to leach every passing day. And so it seems like it's pretty pressing that we get volunteers in there to do something. And I'm curious if you could enlighten us a little bit.
Yeah, so 3 months ago when I came back to City Hall, I found this dispute between the Oregon Department of Transportation and the City of Portland over their intergovernmental agreement, their contract. And we've resolved that. So that's been an issue for the backlog of the accumulation of trash along the ODOT freeway lands and state highway lands. And also during that time, during the pandemic, based on CDC recommendations, there was also a pause in any sort of movement of camps. The city at that time didn't want to make life worse for those that were houseless by asking them to move, even though under the law we're required to notice and to provide everyone that the city asked to leave, to provide them a shelter space and alternative camping space. But those two things combined really have been one of the reasons for the backlog of trash, especially around, well, in the illegal dump site areas, and then also around some of the unsanctioned camp areas, because again, they don't have garbage service. So there wasn't a lot of place for them to put their refuge. So in the mayor's proposed budget that was passed 2 weeks ago, it increases funding for cleanups. Like I said, we completed and we worked to sort of heal the rift between ODOT and the city of Portland. Right now, that's on trash. Right now, we're in communications with the governor and ODOT over graffiti, which is also blanketing a lot of the city, including freeway lands, ODOT freeway lands. But the trash pickup, there was a dispute. We got it resolved. And so work is underway to clean along the freeways. But it's a big backlog to deal with.
One of the questions that Zachary was pointing to is access onto the Pacific rail.
Yeah,
land.
thanks. That's a different issue. They won't give us access. And they're actually, they're governed by federal law. And so we're not allowed to have access to the railroad right away. We are in discussions with Burlington Northern Santa Fe, and I'm seeing some promise there. And I hope if we can get a voluntary agreement, that hopefully we can also get the Union Pacific and the Willamette Pacific railroads. But the big issue there for them is if a volunteer is working, or even an employee, a paid employee is working on their property and they hurt themselves. They've been sued in the past in those situations. So the city is looking to indemnify Solve and other volunteer people that put our volunteers together. But it's a tricky one. The railroads they're a whole different animal because they're governed by federal rules and federal protections.
Any suggestions on how to put some pressure to maybe move that a little bit? I mean, is this like talking to Senator Wyden and Merkley? Is it DeFazio on transportation? I mean, what's the route to go there?
Yeah, good question. It definitely helps to talk to, and I'll put my contact information, email, and work mobile phone, be sure. And I'm a texter, not a voicemail person. The Congressman DeFazio, I used to work for Congressman DeFazio. Congressman Blumenauer is on the right committees and has been very helpful in getting us at least to the table with BNSF. So far, so good. And so just send me a note of your interest on this particular issue, and I will keep you posted and when you can help us.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for getting out there and helping to clean the place up. It's a mess.
When you say things like the city is a mess and it's ratty, you're dehumanizing the folks out there that are houseless. They're not making the city rattier.
No, I'm not.
They're just trying to survive.
No, actually, that's not what I said. What I said is these neighbors, these unhoused neighbors, have not had adequate services from the city. What I also said is, for example, they haven't had any garbage service. Where else are they supposed to put their stuff? That's specifically what I said. So I don't accept your recharacterization of my statement.
You use terms like ratty.
Oh, the city is ratty and messy. I don't think anyone on this Zoom would disagree. But I was also clear, there's a reason why folks that are unhoused, including the fact that they get folks that dump their garbage into their camps. I've said those three things, and those are not their fault.
I had another question from the board. what are you doing to help small business storefronts that are being impacted by the graffiti bandits and the homeless campers?
So my boss, Mayor Wheeler, and Commissioner Dan Bryan and others are looking at what other cities have done on the West Coast, which is to provide safe sleeping areas for folks that are our neighbors that are unhoused, and that in those safe sleeping areas, providing them the basic services that right now, as I mentioned, the city is not providing. And that the option there is done in other cities like Seattle, where there's where there's danger, like on the freeways. It's just an inherently dangerous place for people to try to access their camp, their tents and their camps, to find a better place that's off the freeway and provide them better services by better organizing folks where you can camp and where you cannot camp. So that's the direction that we're headed, and it's based on what other cities are doing on the West Coast.
Great. Thank you. Suzanne, you've been doing some work with the homeless along the north part of Rose City Park golf course. Can you share some of your experience in doing that?
There we go. This is not my computer, so I had to.
Oh.
I'm
Oh, you
good.
got it.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. We're in our fourth year, actually, as of March, of cleaning up the blackberries on the north side of the Rose City Park golf course. And I can say that when we started that project, not only were the blackberries covering the trail, they were also, we were disrupting 3 homeless camps in that area. And people didn't feel safe walking that trail at that time. And so because of the community effort, there's been probably 10 of us, we're up to 10. It started out with 5 of us meeting on Sunday morning at 9:30 and clipping away for 2 hours. And over that time, we have an email list of over 90 people at this point. And our goal is to restore it into native plants over time. Obviously, blackberries have a mind of their own at times, but we're making great progress. And so it's been an amazing project of being able to get to know your neighbors. So we just sat there and clipped, and pretty soon we had the whole, lots of people that were asking what we were doing and what our goals are. So our goal right now is that we will, in the fall, buy plants through a grant and actually be doing plantings in November, when it's the best time to be able to get those native plants into play. So that's the project. It started out.
Thank you. Thank you for your neighborhood work. It's fantastic. Blackberries are tough.
Yeah. Well, we become one of them.
Yeah.
They're tough, but we're tougher. We're tougher.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah.
And I must say that native plants that we uncovered were the ones that were tough. It was amazing what we discovered underneath Oregon grapes and all kinds of native plants that survived those blackberries. So we are nurturing back to health.
Well, thank you. That's great. You're an inspiration.
Yes, and I also learned quite a bit from their approach in dealing with the homeless, and actually they would work around where the camps were, and left places where they were shielded, as well as handing them trash bags to take care of their own litter.
And we partnered, or actually hooked up with a wonderful group in North Portland that was, working with the homeless. And it was called Neighbor Helping Neighbor. And they really we're teaching of, ways to be able to include the homeless into our work as opposed to not considering them part of our neighborhood. And so there was, and we did it in a safe way. So they were ones that taught us how to be safe in being able to pick up needles, for instance, and being able to approach them and start with queries as opposed to demands. And that was really quite an education of being able to tap into what got started up in Northeast or North Portland. And it was a veteran who was basically addressing the homeless vets that started putting this whole methodology of how to be able to address this homelessness in a very human way or great humanity. So I highly recommend going out and looking up Neighbors Helping Neighbors up in North Portland. I don't know, Sam, have you worked with them or know of?
Yeah, I have in my last time in City Hall, not recently, but they continue on strong and it's a great group.
Yeah.
Terry, did you have any more questions? You had raised one online that you had wanted to ask Sam.
I don't remember what I raised online at this point. I do have a question I'd like to ask Sam. It's sort of related to the small businesses and whatnot. When are you going to open up City Hall, bring the folks back downtown, have the council meetings downtown, which will invigorate City Hall by getting more people down there, including people like myself, that the only time I would go down would be to testify, and I can't do it over Zoom because I don't have internet at home.
Gotcha. Yeah, the powers that be at City Hall are looking at when to bring city workers back. And the original sort of herd immunity forecast was September. And it looks like it's more likely to be the end of June. By the end of this week, there's a lot of indications that we'll move to low category. The governor will say low category, which means we can have more people in restaurants and indoor dining, more people that can gather outside. And we're at 63% right now in terms of statewide, in terms of immunizations of 1 or 2 shots. And the goal was 70. And the latest forecast is that instead of September, it will be the end of June. So 4th of July weekend, we should, if all goes as well, we should be out of category 1 into whatever they're going to call the new normal. It won't be exactly like before the pandemic. So bringing Pacific Corps just announced that they're bringing their workers back to the central city offices, and I know conversations are happening at City Hall right this week about when city workers should come back.
And Tamara, if I did have a question online, go ahead, and you have a copy of it, go ahead. I think it was just an extension of one of yours or one of the board.
No,
questions.
Linda put a question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Let's see, where's the chat?
The Oakland Major League Baseball. Linda, baseball fan. Yeah. Hi, Linda. Yeah, the Major League Baseball is going to they're the Oakland A's in Oakland, California. By July 21st, whether or not they're going to stay in Oakland or move to another city. Cities that the MLB is looking at include Las Vegas, Nashville, Portland, and one other one. So there is a local group of folks that have been around for years that have been advocating for bringing Major League Baseball to Portland, and we'll see what happens. There are a number of sites around the city that they've looked at. One is Terminal 2, which is sort of on the west side of the Fremont Bridge, and another site that's been mentioned is the Lloyd Center site, Lloyd Center Mall site. But it's early days for this discussion. The mayor hasn't heard from the Major League Baseball commissioner, so we'll see what happens.
So what do you see the neighborhood's role in the cleanup of Portland?
Yeah, so the 25th and 26th will be the annual Pick It Up Portland. And so, like I said, that'll be an opportunity for one of many numerous opportunities for neighborhoods to participate in cleaning up their area. The Adopt a Block program, as I mentioned, is also going to be expanded to parks and to open areas, natural areas and open areas where nobody lives there. It's not their block necessarily. So in a couple of weeks, we'll be getting out the city's recovery website, which is behereforportland.org, is being revamped. And now that we have a better idea of when we're going from moderate category to low category, we can move forward with the planning and execution of these citywide cleanup efforts. I'm looking forward to it. I go out like Zachary. I go out, I go out on average at least every other week, and I find it incredibly satisfying. And I've lost part of my COVID 20 extra pounds, so it's also good for your health.
Good.
So Sam, I have a question. We had real troubles in Hollywood where people would gather at a park and then come down Sandy Boulevard and do graffiti and break windows. And, it's just disheartening, as any neighborhood would feel that way. Do you feel that is curtailed? Do you feel that, that was a phase? Are we still dealing with that in other parts of the city? Or how can we, I just came away and say, how can we as neighbors try to, deal with that? It was really disheartening.
Yeah, great question. So part of the reason you see plywood up, not just in the central city, but around in business districts around the city is, this break-ins and also this kind of vandalism, criminal vandalism. And, our job in city government, as you can imagine, is protect people's right to free speech, free assembly, but it's also our job if people commit crimes to arrest those suspects and have the district attorney prosecute for vandalism. So that's what we've been doing, and the district attorney and the city and the courts and the sheriff who runs the jails are better aligned than ever around that distinction between passionate free speech, yes, breaking windows of local small businesses, including, you might have read about the Boys and Girls Club, three times, I think twice, a downtown soup kitchen for those that are living with houselessness has been broken into in a church, burning porta potties, things like that. We draw the line at that. So free speech, yes. Criminal destruction, no. And so we're making arrests when that happens. Again, we think that's a common sense distinction that most Portlanders agree with.
Well, I do want to give a shout out to the Hollywood Boosters, who really started organizing and getting, those storefronts back, back to a new normal, I guess is the way to say. But I think that, part of your program is when that does happen, having a very systematic way of being able to get that destruction back to, addressing it as quickly as possible, because it is graffiti. It is, basically disruptive for the business community. So
I feel
anything
like
that could help
a
with
lot of
that,
people
that would
who
be
make
great.
those who and this is coming from an outside point of view. So a lot of the folks who do graffiti, break windows, property damage, etc., are not being listened to by our city, and these are the ways that they're finding to be heard. And so I think that instead of criminalizing these folks, we should listen to them.
Well, Zoe, I don't think it's an either or. I think that we definitely need to be listening to those folks. But again, crossing the line and beating up a Boys and Girls Club makes no sense to us. But whether it makes sense or not, it's against the law.
Well, it would be nice to see the city doing more to address some of the very large underlying causes of great distress.
Of course.
Including the police. And I should say, I'm a person who used to be very quick to call 911 to report things. I used to feel really good about it, like I was really helping out by helping keep order. And I don't think I could call the police. I don't know what it would take for me to call the police. I just feel like the police make things more dangerous. I'm very sorry not to see more direct addressing of that. I understand it's politically very difficult, but would love to see that. And that really it's part of the root cause. I mean, of the illegal behavior. I'm not saying the behavior is not illegal, but in addition to making distinctions between free speech and illegal activity, it would be great for the city to more strongly address this cause of so much distress and unsafety.
Yeah.
So many Portlanders.
Yeah, I agree. And my last time in City Hall, I don't know who was around, but I fired and disciplined more police than any predecessor in modern times. And unfortunately, the system is really broken. And under the state law, they appealed their firing and discipline, and almost all of them the city was forced to rehire. So there's work to be done in reforming the police bureau. There's no question about it. There's work to be done, like State Senator Lou Frederick's work to reform the labor arbitration that really removes the control around police, city council's ability, a mayor's ability to hire and fire police.
The union is a real problem right now.
Union and the union contract is
Right.
absolutely a real problem. We're in bargaining right now. It's public bargaining. It has to be done in public, and I hope that the council will stay firm. We're the only top 75 city in the United States. We're the only city without a requirement that police have body cameras. I hope that changes. My boss, the mayor, certainly wants to see that change and the accountability that comes with that, not only with arrests, but in protests, where I think it would be very helpful to have some video evidence that would help document when there's a lot of good police, but obviously there are some bad ones, and we need to root them out.
I'd like to ask
Cops had body cams. They turned them off.
Yeah, well, they're body cams, Zoe, that they can't turn off.
I'd like to ask a related question. I actually feel like I should know the answer to this, and I don't, so I'm going to ask it. Has there been any real discussion about decoupling criminal enforcement and traffic enforcement, and approaching traffic enforcement without weapons and just as a ticketing approach, and then kind of secondarily using roboticizing speeding enforcement? I'm just, as a person who rides their bike all the time and has a 2-year-old who rides with me all the time, it's scary as hell out there, honestly. and Portland's a biking city, and it's still scary because people are just flying all over the place. And so I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so last year, the city council removed, cut $15 million out of the police bureau's budget. And as part of that, the elimination of special units, including the traffic division. And it was instead the work of every patrol officer in the police bureau to do traffic enforcement. I share the, and there's been abuse over the years, pretext, a brake light that's out, one brake light that's out as a pretext to pull people over. And so I think both addressing the misuse of traffic enforcement, but also having some sort of traffic safety ability by cities are important. I personally agree. I actually don't know what the mayor thinks about this, but I personally agree that traffic enforcement, unless there's a cause otherwise, can be done with unarmed traffic enforcement officers. I spent time in Europe, and that's a common option. That's a common choice that cities make. But like you, as a bike rider, maybe not as anymore as often as you do, but I feel it as well. And so I don't think it has to be a choice between armed police officers doing traffic enforcement or nothing. And we are looking into best practices in other communities.
Kind of a question of how do you suggest plugging in to advocate? I would love to be part of that.
Yeah, so the bicycle, there's a bicycle advisory committee, and if you email me, I'll send you to the right place where you can sign up for that. I don't know if there are any openings, but filling out the application and getting on the waiting list, I think would be great. The number of bicycle trips, which bicycling is one of my passions, personally, and for a city to have more people riding bikes just makes sense on so many different levels, but it's got to be safe and perceived as safe. And so the bicycle master plan that the city put together has a long ways to go for implementation. And part of it's got to be more grade separating bikes and cars. But it will always need to include some amount of enforcement. So you could advocate that to the bicycle advisory committee, and happy to connect you.
So we have a little bit of time left. Any more questions from the audience here? Since we have Sam. Well, I think it's been wonderful having you, Sam. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us better understand what's going on and what resources are out there. And we'll talk at our next board meeting about the June 25th and 26th cleanup.
Fantastic. Well, Tamara, thanks for your leadership and everyone here in the neighborhood association. It's a great neighborhood, and I want to be supportive. So if you got my contact information, if I can ever be of any kind of service to you or the neighborhood, let me know. I'm not a first responder, but I want to make sure you're getting good city services. So let me know if things you're not getting what the kind of services and response that you need from the city. So thanks, everybody.
On behalf of the neighborhood, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye. Okay, at this time, we have our committee reports. I'd like to turn to Jennifer to give us some input about the communication and events.
So I think everybody should have received their hard copy of the newsletter delivered to your door or local business. So if you haven't, I have 35 copies sitting right here. So let me know and I'll mail you one. But also it is available online on the website. So you can go to rcpna.org and find a copy of it. The next newsletter is scheduled to come out just prior to the October general meeting. So if you're interested in publishing anything or advertising in that newsletter, the deadline will be September 8th or so early September. We have not committed to doing a summer issue at this time, but if we do, it would be digital, and we would post that through the website, Facebook, if I can figure out how to post there, Nextdoor, etc. And otherwise, communications, for the communications committee, that kind of sums it up. I don't know. I have my editor is here in the box next to me on my screen anyway. So if she has anything she wants to add, Linda, let me know. And then I'll just segue into the events committee. We are still planning to have, at this point, our concerts in the park. We are kind of keeping an eye on what that might look like, dependent on COVID related restrictions. So
We got some notification from the Parks Bureau that they have backed off from their COVID tracing requirement. So we just have to follow whatever is current at that time. We do not have to get a listing of everybody who shows up for those, which would have been a real, it would have been something really, really difficult to do. And as part of communications, we have these beautiful signs that are available. We got 25 sets of them. Come, let me know. Give me an address. Give me a phone number. We'll make contact. I'd love to get them out of my front room.
Jennifer,
yes,
a
sir.
question. When I was trying to get signed in, I looked on the website, and there was a mention of the Transportation and Land Use Committee meeting last week, but there was nothing about this meeting on the website, the rcpna.org website, other than in the calendar. And I would have expected it to be on the front page of the website.
Jerry, that's probably partly my fault for not having it set up early enough to get it to our web person to get it onto the website. So I'm learning how to do this. This is my second time through. I'll get better at it.
Well, yeah, I know. I kind of get mixed up with even getting onto the Zoom meetings sometimes. So, and I thank Zoe for sending me the link. I think Tamara's thing went to spam again, and I didn't look there.
Yeah, the Zoom information should be in the agenda. I know there's not necessarily a lot of lead time on that, but it should always be there on our meeting agendas. And I am going to try to work with Richard about seeing if we can have a stable Zoom login for our board meetings, general meetings, and committee meetings, so those can be included in a calendar invite. So it should be super duper easy. We're not there yet, but we have a meeting soon.
Thank you.
So that's all I have for right now.
Okay, Don, what do you have for the
Just
safety
one,
committee?
excuse me, Tamara, just one short comment to tie in Zachary's concern and as well as Sam's concern about the bicycling. I'll tie that into Richard's signs. If everybody will take a slow down sign and put it in their yard or scattered throughout our Rose City Park neighborhood, that might help some of the speeders that cause harm to the bicyclists and pedestrians. That's all.
Don?
Thanks, Emra. I've been, Safety Committee has been working on being responsive to requests from people in the neighborhood with concerns, trying to find out solutions. We worked earlier with some people having issues with neighbors or houseless neighbors, and tried to develop a kind of a tiered response on how to work with resources that are already available through the city and resources that don't involve police involvement. So that's the last resort instead of the first resort. I've just been in contact with Zoe the last few days about maybe expanding that to provide a resource list of responses to dealing with neighborhood issues. So again, the purpose is to try to identify neighborhood concerns and get a list of responses so you can have a tiered response to address your concerns. So I'm starting to work with Zoe on that now that I'm back and getting things going. I'm also, because I'm also representative for Rose City Park to CNN, I've been talking with various other neighborhood representatives, and I'm trying to develop a best practices list of things that other neighborhood associations are doing that are working in their neighborhoods, dealing with similar concerns and similar strategies to build capacity and increase the livability of the neighborhood. So I hope to have that and continue to work on that as well, and maybe bring some of that back to our neighborhood association as strategies that we can utilize within our neighborhood and adapt them to work better for us. And that's all I got.
Don, I'd like to ask you a question too.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any discussion on the safety committee of the Ellington apartments? I realize they're not in our neighborhood, but I live on the street. Right across the street is Madison South, and they back up to the Ellington. And since the city has taken them over, there's been 3 shootings up there. I mean, I don't feel safe walking around my neighborhood at night anymore, to be honest with you. My neighbors next door are 80 years old and Asian. Very nice people. We get along great. I don't even see them out of their house much anymore. I know he's got dementia, which doesn't help. But I'm just concerned that this may be playing a role in people feeling safe on at least my street. That there's been a lot of issues. There's other issues that have gone on up there too, and I don't know where they are now because I haven't kept track of them. When Ben lived at the house on the corner on the other side of the street, he kind of filled us in, but he's been gone for over a year now. So I don't follow what's going on up there. But I just wonder if there's been any conversation on the safety committee about the issues that may or may not be taking place within the Ellington.
Well, you know, Terry, there hasn't been any conversation lately. I know that a year and a half ago, there was some concern of increases in crime, property incidents being attributed. And there were questions then about whether the Ellington was there. And at the time, we took a look at, there was the ability through Portland maps to track reported police incidents of property damage, of personal incidents. And it seemed once we tracked down all the incidents in Rose City Park neighborhood that there wasn't an increased reporting coming from the Ellington per se, that most of the issues were along the high traffic corridors and the corridors that led across the Banfield. So it seemed like it was more crimes of opportunity, that people were coming in, getting off work, walking within a block or two of a high exit corridor. That's where most of the issues were. And so at that time, we didn't identify the Ellington. We had the new property manager of the Ellington speak to us. And she said that at the time that she was just coming into her new position, there wasn't an identified security group that was working with the Ellington, and they were on the way to dealing with that. We discussed that when we got together with the neighborhood response team, the 2 police officers that are responsible for kind of North Precinct, and the huge chunk of the North Precinct. Last year, the city reassigned officers from the neighborhood response teams because of a shortage in staffing. And I have heard that they have since reestablished, so we do have some response. But aside from that, there hasn't been specific conversations with the Ellington apartments specifically. And again, when concerns come in on specific incidents there and fears of neighbors that live in the area, I mean, we develop, these are the people that you can call, these are the resources that we have. As a neighborhood association, if it comes to the point where the neighborhood association can write a letter to the city or the police department or the North Precinct saying, we'd like to work more closely with you because we've identified some of these problems, that's something we can possibly do, as well as work more closely with Madison South. But we haven't had any specific discussions with the Ellington to answer your question.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it, because the last shooting was like a couple of months ago or 3 months ago, something like that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your input, Don, and your question, Terry. I just want to give you a quick update of the diversity committee. We did meet this month and came up with a draft land acknowledgement document that we're going to be forwarding to the board, as well as some language for as far as community agreements as guidance for communications in and among our groups and to the public. Again, with the focus of equity and making sure that those that may be of disadvantaged background have an opportunity to speak, and assuring that they have adequate time. So there's some of that coming forward to the next board meeting on June 7th. I think we have one more. No, we got land use, and then I don't see Meg here for the playground. So Kelly, could you give us an update on the land use?
Zoe, do you have a question first?
I was just going to briefly recommend How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I'm in the middle of reading it right now, and it's really changed the way I've thought about a lot of things and brought issues and ways and just a lot of things to forefront that I hadn't thought about before. And he's a superb writer. I just highly recommend it. It's available at the library. Well, I have it right now, but after I return it, it'll be available at the library.
What's his name?
Ibram X. Kendi. I can put it in the chat.
Okay.
And the title.
So quickly, land use and transportation. So at our May land use and transportation meeting, we had a representative from PBOT, a couple of representatives talk about their safe routes to school. And there specifically the concerns were 64th and Brazee. So what PBOT has done is installed a bunch of plastic pylons or candlesticks at that intersection and a lot of yellow paint to help define the pedestrian crossings for neighborhood kids accessing the local schools. So the neighbors were not thrilled with the design and expressed those concerns to PBOT at the meeting. The way we ended this was PBOT was going to look for some additional funds to build a more maybe permanent solution with curbs and planters. And our committee will keep the neighbors informed with future developments there. In our April meeting, we had a presentation from Heather Flint Chatto on PDX Main Street's design guidelines. There's an opportunity for these guidelines that were originally developed for Division Street. It has since been adopted by several other neighborhoods. So there's an opportunity for Rose City Park to look at incorporating some of those items. So our committee is going to look further into it and perhaps advocate for them to be applied to Sandy Boulevard and some other local commercial streets. Also in April, we had a presentation by Scott Cohen from PBOT, who is doing an initiative called Slow Streets. Their project is for safer, busy streets through the use of concrete planners, 15-mile-an-hour street signs, and other tools. So there's 6 streets within Rose City Park that have been identified for the program. So Scott will return to a future meeting and tell us what he has planned as the design goes further. Finally, the Archdiocese at the Southeast Asian Vicariate, Our Lady of Lavang. We understand that there's a offer pending on that property that has to be approved by the Vatican and Rome. I've been trading phone calls with the local pastor to understand about that offer and what the developer who has made the offer, what he may have planned for the area.
Okay.
Hey, Kelly, I was wondering if you have any information on the notice of destruction of a historic structure at the German American Society?
That is the base for the George Washington Monument.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Evidently, poor George is not coming back.
Fine by me.
Yeah.
Sad.
Sad. So it is 9 o'clock now. I would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. This has been recorded on YouTube. So if you want to see the entire thing and you've lost some of the time or you had to run off to another meeting, please take the time and look through it. Also, please put your vote in. I put the link on the chat line for those of you who want to vote for the board members. And also there is a link there for those who want to donate to the Oregon Food Bank. Please give to your community if you can. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Night, y'all.